Welcome, brave souls, to a journey into the unknown. Imagine sitting alone on a midnight train, only to realize you're not as alone as you think. Tonight's story will grip you with every breath, every shadow, and every whisper. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a chilling tale like this. Your support means the world and keeps the stories coming now. Settle in, and prepare yourself for the silent passenger. The last train. The rain had been falling for so long that the streets looked like sheets of black glass, reflecting the jaundiced glow of the old street lamps. Emily's shoes slapped against the slick pavement as she hurried toward the station, the sound almost swallowed by the steady hiss of the storm. She gripped her umbrella tighter, though it did little to stop the cold droplets that slid down her neck. She had missed the earlier train, work had run late again, and this was her last chance to get home tonight. The midnight train to Blackmore. She didn't like taking it. Something about being underground so late, when the city was mostly asleep, had always unsettled her. The stations felt different at this hour, emptier, colder, as if they belonged to something other than people. When she reached the platform, she found it deserted and no chatter, no footsteps. No tired commuters slumped on benches, just a hollow, echoing quiet broken by the occasional rattle of a loose sign swaying in the wind. Somewhere far down the tunnel, water dripped at an irregular rhythm, each drop a faint metallic plink. The train emerged from the darkness without warning. Its headlights pierced the mist like two pale, watchful eyes. The steel giant groaned as it slowed, brakes screaming against the rails. The air smelled faintly of rust and oil. The carriage door slid open with a sound like a hissed warning. Inside, the train was empty, completely empty. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered unevenly, humming like a nest of wasps. Emily stepped in, her heels clicking against the scuffed linoleum. The doors closed behind her with a heavy, definitive thud. She chose a seat by the window, sliding her bag onto the seat beside her. The city lights outside blurred as the train began to move, replaced by streaks of rain racing down the glass. She exhaled slowly, telling herself it was fine. She'd read a little on her phone, and in less than an hour, she'd be home. For a few minutes, there was only the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks. Then, faintly, she heard it, breathing. Not hers, slow, steady, deliberate. Inhale, exhale. She froze, her eyes flicking to the seat directly in front of her, empty. The worn leather shone dully under the lights, stitched edges frayed from years of use. But the sound was coming from there. The hairs along the back of her neck prickled. She told herself it could be the vents, the wind, anything. Yet deep down, she knew it was the sound of someone she couldn't see. The invisible companion. The sound was faint, but it had weight, like the quiet presence of someone sitting in the dark corner of a room. Emily tilted her head slightly, holding her breath to make sure she wasn't imagining it. Inhale, exhale. That it was measured, unhurried. The kind of breathing you'd hear from someone who was completely at ease or watching. Her eyes locked on the seat in front of her again. The cracked leather gleamed under the dim light. The air above it shimmered faintly, as if disturbed by body heat, but there was no one there. She leaned sideways just enough to peek down the aisle, looking for any crouched figure, a bag, a coat draped over the seat. Nothing. The idea that she might be hearing echoes from another carriage briefly crossed her mind. But this train was almost ancient. Its doors between carriages were heavy, sealed, and didn't let sound pass through easily. Another breath, louder this time. Emily swallowed, her throat dry. She glanced at the window beside her, its black glass acting like a mirror. First, she saw only her own reflection, pale skin, damp hair clinging to her forehead, eyes wide. But behind her reflection, faint and fleeting, she thought she saw the silhouette of a man seated in front of her, shoulders hunched, head slightly tilted toward her. Her breath hitched. She turned quickly. The seat was still empty. The train swayed gently, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Somewhere far ahead, the wheels screeched faintly as they curved along the track. But the breathing didn't stop. Emily's pulse quickened. She gripped her phone tighter, the urge to call someone rising sharply. But she couldn't think of what she'd even say. "I'm on a train and I can hear someone who isn't there." It'd sound like the kind of thing the police would rush to help with. The train passed through a stretch of darkness, the windows going completely black. She stared at her own dim reflection, straining her ears. The breathing had changed. It was closer now. The first stop. The train jolted as it slowed, the metallic screech of brakes scraping against the rails slicing through the rhythmic hum inside the carriage. Emily's eyes snapped toward the window. Hollow Ford Station loomed ahead, a forgotten outpost, swallowed by shadows and silence. The dim glow of flickering lamps cast elongated, wavering shapes on cracked concrete. No footsteps echoed on the platform, and no lights burned in the station's windows. The only sound was the occasional drip of water falling from a rusted pipe, hitting the ground with a hollow plop. The station looked abandoned, forsaken, like a place time had chosen to forget. The door slid open with their familiar hiss, but no one stepped on. Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine as the cold night air slipped inside, mingling with the faint scent of damp wood and mildew. She hugged herself tighter, the dampness in her clothes suddenly more noticeable. As the doors closed and the train shuddered forward again, Emily's attention snapped back to the seat in front of her. That same worn leather, empty but alive with something unseen. And then she noticed it. The breathing, slow, deliberate, was now closer than before. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her skin prickled, every nerve screaming warning. The air around her thickened, as if the unseen passenger was inching nearer, leaning into her space with an icy presence she couldn't see but could undeniably feel. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her trembling hands. The cold draft brushed past her ear, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. For a fleeting moment, Emily swore she caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of her eye, something flickering just beyond her peripheral vision. She whipped her head around, but the aisle was empty, bathed in that sickly fluorescent light that buzzed overhead. The train's steady clatter on the rails seemed distant now, replaced by the deafening sound of her own quickened breath and pounding heartbeat. She wanted to believe it was all in her mind, but deep down she knew she wasn't alone. The whisper, the oppressive silence of the carriage pressed in on Emily like a living thing, thick and suffocating. She clenched her fists in her lap, desperate to hold on to some shred of calm. The breathing, the relentless, deliberate rhythm continued. But now, something else stirred in the air. That a whisper that it was faint, barely audible, like the rustle of dry leaves skittering across a forgotten graveyard. Emily's head snapped toward the source, straining to catch the words, but they dissolved into the shadows before they could take shape. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, fingers trembling. Turning on the voice recorder, she held it up, hoping to capture the elusive sound. For a full minute, all she heard was the steady inhale and exhale. Then, beneath the breathing, the whisper came again, low, guttural, and unintelligible. Not English, not any language she recognized. Her breath hitched, the words slithered around her, curling in the corners of the carriage like cold smoke. They seemed to hiss and pulse, as if alive, threatening, yet distant. Emily's eyes darted around. The seat in front of her remained empty, but the air felt charged, electric, with something malevolent lurking just beyond perception. Her skin prickled. The hairs on her arms stood on end. "Who's there?" she whispered, voice barely more than a trembling breath. And no answer, just the whisper, growing softer, retreating into silence. The train rattled forward, the metal groan of wheels echoing like a dirge. Emily felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears, drowning out every other sound. She wasn't sure if what she was experiencing was real or a cruel trick of her mind. but the whisper lingered. The mirror reflection. As the train plunged into a long tunnel, the world outside vanished, swallowed by impenetrable darkness. The windows transformed into polished mirrors, reflecting the dim glow of the carriage's flickering lights. Emily's tired eyes caught her own pale face, staring back at her damp strands of hair clinging to her forehead, eyes wide and filled with a growing dread. But something was wrong. Behind her reflection, just beyond the edge of the glass, a shadow shifted. At first, it was subtle, a flicker of movement, a ripple in the stillness. Then it took form at a man. His face was gaunt and hollow, skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. His eyes were sunken and black as empty wells, swallowing the light around them. His lips curled into a slow, unnatural smile that twisted his face into something monstrous, too wide, too sharp, too wrong. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her heart thudded violently, threatening to burst free from her chest. Frozen, she stared as the figure tilted his head toward her, eyes boring into hers through the glass. The smile deepened, revealing rows of pointed teeth that gleamed like shards of glass. Panic surged through her veins like ice water. With a violent jerk, she spun around, but the seat in front was empty. The flickering lights hummed, casting sickly yellow shadows that danced across the worn leather. The whisper of the train on the tracks returned, distant and hollow, like a fading heartbeat. Emily sank back into her seat, trembling. The reflection remained. The man's eyes followed her every move, burning with an unspoken promise of something terrible yet to come. The touch, the chill in the air deepened, creeping along Emily's skin like invisible fingers, tracing icy patterns. She pulled her coat tighter around her, but it did little to fend off the sudden drop in temperature. The carriage seemed to have shifted. The atmosphere thickened with a heavy, suffocating weight. Then, without warning, a faint brush grazed the side of her head. It was barely there, like the softest whisper of a feather. A fleeting caress, but it sent a jolt of electricity down her spine. Her breath caught, and goosebumps erupted across her arms. Emily's eyes snapped open wide, darting around the empty carriage as if expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. The faint hum of the overhead lights was the only sound, but the silence pressed on her eardrums like a vice. Her trembling hand instinctively reached for her bag, which she had carefully placed on the seat beside her. But when she glanced down, her heart sank. Her bag was gone. Her breath hitched. Panic flooded through her veins. Hot and sharp, she scanned the surrounding seats frantically. There, on the floor beneath her seat, lay her bag, half hidden in the dim glow of the flickering lights. Slowly, cautiously, she bent down to retrieve it, fingers trembling as they closed around the strap. The moment her hand touched the bag, a sudden gust of cold air rushed past her ear, carrying with it the faintest echo of a breath, a slow, deliberate inhale, followed by an exhale. Emily jerked upright, heart hammering in her chest. The seat across from her remained empty, but the presence of the unseen passenger was unmistakably near. The phone call. Emily's trembling fingers fumbled with her phone, the device suddenly feeling heavier in her hand as if weighted by the tension that filled the air around her. The screen flickered to life, displaying an unknown number blinking insistently. Her pulse quickened. With a hesitant breath, she pressed the answer button. Silence, a void that swallowed the sound of the train. Her breathing, even the beating of her heart. Then, breathing slow, measured, uncomfortably close. The same breath she had heard since. Boarding. Emily's voice quivered. "Who to is this?" Static crackled, the line warbling as if struggling to hold on. Then a rasping whisper emerged, words broken, fragmented, as if forced through clenched teeth. "I'm dead already, dear." The cold air seemed to tighten around her, wrapping like icy fingers, squeezing her chest. The carriage lights flickered, plunging her into momentary darkness before returning with a flicker. Emily's skin prickled, every instinct screaming to drop the phone and flee. But curiosity, or Madness rooted her in place. She whispered into the receiver, "What do you want?" No answer. Only that haunting breath rising and falling right beside her. The lock. Desperation clawed at Emily's chest as she pushed herself to her feet, her legs unsteady beneath her. Every instinct screamed at her to escape the suffocating silence and invisible menace that haunted the carriage. She moved cautiously toward the door leading to the next carriage, her fingers trembling as they grasped the cold metal handle. She pulled. Nothing. The door didn't budge. Trying the other door at the opposite end, she found it equally unyielding, locked tight as if welded shut. Her breath hitched in panic, the sense of entrapment wrapping around her like a noose. The lights flickered above, casting long, jittery shadows that danced mockingly on the walls. The faint hum of the train was swallowed by an ominous stillness that pressed in from every direction. The invisible presence was no longer just a sound or a feeling, it was close, too. Close. Emily felt it, a cold breath grazing the nape of her neck. Her skin prickled with the undeniable awareness of something hovering just behind her. Her hands shook violently as she spun around, searching frantically for the source. But the seat across from her was empty. And yet, the breathing was louder now, as if it had moved inches away right behind her. The train rumbled forward, each second stretching endlessly as dread twisted tighter inside her, trapped alone, and watched. The photograph. Panic surged through Emily's veins like wildfire. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as she fumbled for her phone, desperate to capture any proof of the terrifying presence stalking her. Without turning around, she lifted the camera and aimed it over her shoulder toward the empty seat behind her. The shutter clicked, echoing loudly in the stillness. For a moment, Emily held her breath, heart hammering against her ribcage as she hesitated to look at the screen. Slowly, she swiped to the last photo, her eyes widening in disbelief and horror. There, standing mere inches behind her seat, was a pale figure, gaunt and hollow-eyed, with skin so deathly pale it seemed almost translucent. Its black eyes stared directly into the camera, empty voids that swallowed light and hope alike. The figure leaned forward, lips curled into a sinister smile that stretched too wide, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Emily's blood ran cold. Her breath caught in her throat as a scream threatened to escape, but she stifled it. The figure's malevolent gaze seemed to pierce through her very soul. Her trembling hand dropped the phone, the screen going dark as it hit the floor with a soft thud. She spun around, heart pounding wildly, but the seat was empty once more. The carriage lights flickered erratically, casting grotesque shadows that danced along the walls like twisted specters. Emily sank back into her seat, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chill that filled the air. She wasn't alone, and whatever was with her, it wasn't human. The blackout, the flickering lights overhead grew more erratic, their buzzing turning into a harsh, grating noise that clawed at Emily's nerves. The steady hum of the train's engine faltered, sputtering as if struggling against an unseen force. Suddenly, the entire carriage was swallowed by darkness. The lights died in unison, plunging Emily into a void so complete it felt as if the world had been torn away beneath her feet. She sat frozen, heart pounding, gripping her phone with white-knuckled fingers, her only lifeline in the oppressive blackness. Every sound around her was magnified. The distant rumble of the train on the tracks, the faint scrape of metal wheels, and the unmistakable sound of breathing close, cold, deliberate. It was right behind her that a wet, rasping voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." Emily's blood turned to ice. Her body trembled uncontrollably as the breath whispered across her neck, icy fingers trailing down her spine. Her mind screamed to move, to flee, but her limbs refused to obey. The darkness pressed in, suffocating and infinite. And then light. The lights flickered back on with a jarring snap, revealing the empty carriage once more. But Emily knew she was not alone. The station that doesn't exist. The train lurched to a halt, the sudden stop jolting Emily forward. She blinked rapidly, disoriented by the abrupt silence that swallowed the usual mechanical sounds. Her gaze darted to the window, expecting the familiar blur of a dimly lit platform, but instead, an unsettling void greeted her eyes. No platform, no flickering station lights, no signs of human life. Only an endless, suffocating darkness stretched beyond the glass, broken by the silhouettes of towering, twisted trees pressing close against the window pane like dark sentinels guarding some ancient secret. The door slid open with their eerie hiss, yet no footsteps echoed onto the train. No one boarded or left that a cold wind swept through the carriage, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decay. Emily's breath caught in her throat as the chilling sound of breathing shifted again, now moving away from her seat, drifting toward the open doors, then creeping back. The unseen presence was playing with her, toying in the shadows. Trapped between reality and nightmare, Emily gripped her seat, heart pounding, knowing that this stop was not on any map. The train's engine rumbled to life once more, the doors closing slowly, sealing her fate as it pulled forward into the darkness beyond. The passenger. The carriage was cloaked in silence once more, the heavy darkness seeming to press against Emily's skin. Her eyes darted nervously, searching the dim corners. The seats bathed in flickering yellow light. Then, without warning, a figure appeared, a tall man, shrouded in a tattered, dark coat that seemed to absorb the feeble light around him. His face was hidden beneath a heavy hood, shadows swallowing every feature. He moved with slow, deliberate steps, the soft scrape of his worn boots the only sound breaking the stillness. Without a word, he settled into the seat directly in front of Emily, the very seat she had believed to be empty all this time. His presence filled the space, a cold, suffocating weight that pressed down on her chest. Emily's breath hitched as she stared, heart pounding violently in her ears. The air grew colder, frost forming along the edges of the window pane. The man remained motionless, his head bowed as if lost in some eternal sorrow. But the breathing now undeniable came from him, slow, deep, steady. Emily wanted to speak, to ask who he was, but no sound escaped her lips. The stranger's presence was both terrifying and mesmerizing, a haunting echo of something long forgotten, a shadow from the depths of nightmares. The smile. Minutes stretched like hours as Emily sat frozen, her eyes locked on the figure before her. The stranger's stillness was unnatural, like a statue carved from shadow and despair. Slowly, agonizingly, he lifted his head. The dim light revealed more than Emily had dared hope to see. His skin was ash gray, mottled and cracked like dried earth. His eyes, black as voids, bore into her with a hunger that chilled her to the bone. Then came the smile that was not a smile born of kindness or warmth, but something monstrous, wide and grotesque, stretching far beyond human limits. Rows of sharp, jagged teeth gleamed like shattered glass. Emily's breath caught in her throat, a scream caught somewhere between terror and disbelief. Her hand shook violently, and she tried to call out, but her phone screen flickered and died, plunging her into darkness once again. The air around her thickened, pressing in like the weight of a tomb. The stranger's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed to pierce the shadows themselves. Emily knew, with bone-deep certainty, that she was face to face with something not of this world. The last message. The stranger leaned forward, his cold, hollow eyes boring into Emily's soul. His breath, fetid and icy, brushed against her cheek like the touch of death itself. "I've been riding this train," he whispered, voice like the rasp of dry leaves, "for a very long time." Emily's fingers trembled as something cold slid into her palm. She looked down to find a crumpled train ticket, yellowed with age and brittle at the edges. The date stamped on it sent a shiver racing down her spine. Over 50 years ago. Her mind raced, struggling to make sense of the impossible before she could speak. The lights flickered violently and then extinguished, swallowing the carriage in darkness. Once more did I end the suffocating blackness. She heard a faint scraping sound like claws dragging slowly across metal. When the lights returned, the stranger was gone, but the ticket remained, and with it a promise. The silent passenger. When the lights flickered back on, Emily was alone once more. The oppressive presence had vanished, leaving only the cold, empty seat in front of her. She stared down at her lap, where the crumpled, decades-old ticket still rested, a tangible relic from a nightmare she couldn't escape. Her fingers trembled as she turned it over. Scrawled on the back, in shaky black ink, were two words that sent a fresh wave of dread crashing over her. Next stop. Her breath caught as she read the final word, written in a hurried, uneven script. You're home. The train continued its relentless journey through the dark night, the steady rhythm of the wheels on the tracks a haunting lullaby. And then the breathing started again, slow, steady, deliberate. Emily's eyes widened in terror. The invisible passenger was still there, riding with her, silent, watching, waiting, and she knew, deep in her bones, that this journey was far from over. Thanks for riding along on this eerie journey with me. If the silent passenger sent chills down your spine, don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing your reactions. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring that notification bell to join our community of fearless story lovers. Your support helps keep these creepy tales alive. Until next time, stay curious, and watch the shadows.